couple of weeks ago, when we were last here, I shared with you the disturbing news, to me, very disturbing, about an American general in the Army, obviously. And his name was General Boykin. And General Boykin is the Under-Secretary of Defense for our government. And he is and has been going around preaching around the country in churches and so forth that our enemy in the battle against terror is not Saddam Hussein or Osama bin Laden, but Satan. Let me show you a picture. In the next one here, there's a picture of General Boykin. This is him. And if you notice all the flowers behind, this is him preaching in the church with his full battle regalia on, you know. And he has a, you know, it's not a question. Don't misunderstand it. And this is the point. He has as much right to express himself as I do or anybody does. And if he believes that right, I mean, he believes that way, there's nothing wrong with him having, nothing wrong with him feeling that way. There's nothing wrong with him expressing himself that way. Absolutely not. The problem comes in because of the position of power that he has. So, that's the problem. And that's what is a little bit scary about this. When you have fundamentalist Christians in control of the government here, and fundamentalist Muslims in control of the government there, and fundamental Jews in control of the government there, you have just got yourself a recipe for one hell of a fight. Each religious group, whether it be Jewish, Muslim, or Christian, has the ability to get weapons to kill the rest of us. And I say the rest of us who really are not involved. And I mean by that, Jewish people who don't want to know from nothing about this, Muslim people who just want to get on with making a little money and live and send the kids to school, and people here. We don't, you know. So the rest of us stand a pretty good chance of getting blown up. And each of these groups, whether it be fundamentalist Christian, Jewish, or Muslim, they act out their political power base on what they believe God wants them to do. Whenever I think of that, when these people say, God spoke to me, God told me, you know, I always say, Joan and I had a friend passed away, and he was a record producer, and he used to produce these Christian song records, you know, people. And he would tell us all the time, people would come up to him and say, Mr. Norcross, God spoke to me and told me that I should come to you about having our group record with your record label. And Marvin would always say, well, that's funny, he never mentioned that to me at all, never said a word to me about that. Now, so you have the general, and he is a devout, fundamentalist, born-again Christian, and he goes about the country preaching about this. Now, in this country, our president, and once again, don't read this the wrong way, he's got a right to, but he has declared that God has spoken to him about the evil in the world. President Bush has confided to others that God spoke to him about being president before he was president. So he's on a mission for God. And there is a new book about President Bush written by a Christian author. It's a very positive book, but it's written by a Christian author, and his name is Stephen Mansfield. And if we look at it, you'll see it. Maybe if you want to buy the book, this is it. It's called The Faith of George W. Bush by Stephen Mansfield. In England, a review was done on this book by The Guardian Unlimited, and I'd like you to look at it with me, if you would. It's interesting, to say the least. The article was written in New York by Paul Harris, who's a writer for The Guardian Unlimited, and if we look at the next slide, it says, the book, which depicts a president who prays each day, no, nothing wrong with that, and believes he is on a direct mission from God, that's a problem, will give ammunition to critics who claim Bush's administration is heavily influenced by extremist Christians. That's a problem. The book, The Faith of George W. Bush, was written by Christian author Stephen Mansfield. It details numerous incidents where Bush's faith has been shown to be at the center of his political thinking. That's a problem. So, there's nothing wrong with this man being a Christian, being a born-again Christian, going to church, praying, and all of this stuff. Where it really crosses the line is any politician or any general who believes they are on a mission directed by God, because that in turn means we will fight the evil ones who are trying to prevent the return of Jesus Christ. And it gets extremely, extremely hairy when that happens. Now, if we look at the next overhead, you'll see that Mr. Harris continues. Bush told the Texan evangelist, and that Texan's evangelist's name he names in this thing, his name is James Robinson. You can see him on television sometime. He told the Texas evangelist that he had a premonition of some form of national disaster happening. Bush said to Texas evangelist James Robinson, "I feel like God wants me to run for president. I can't explain it, but I sense my country is going to need me. Something is going to happen. I know it won't be easy on me or my family, but God wants me to do it." So here now you've got a situation of a direct conflict between Muslims, Jews, and Christians. And each group is headed up by a religious fundamentalist mentality. I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but today an American helicopter was ferrying guys over to the airport so they could come home for a 2 weeks vacation, and it was shot out of the air, and 15 of those guys were killed. And I'm every time I hear this, and I'm trying to think. There's no weapons of mass destruction. There's no connection with Al Qaeda. There's no connection with 9/11. And then you'd say, well, these are evil people, but they shot at the occupying army who's in their country. But it's all done. It's all forgetting about all of this stuff, and forgetting, because there's people who are Republicans who will be offended by this, people who are Democrats who think, and I could care less about both of them. I'm simply talking about the rest of everybody, whether you live in Israel or whether you live in Iraq or Arabia or whether you live here. What is everybody killing each other over? And there's an answer to it. It's religion. But when you see the government and the military, because now you've got a president and you've got a general who's the Undersecretary of Defense hearing messages from God. And I mean, if I had made this up, all right, or if this was my opinion, and I'm talking this because of the fact that it's confirmed. Last week when the last time we talked about General Boykin, I showed you, it came over MSNBC. But when you see people in government, and that includes those overseas, being heavily influenced and directed by people who think this way, then you have to think back on the reasons for going into Iraq. Weapons of mass destruction? No. Al-Qaeda link? No. 9/11? No. All of these things have been discounted. Not one item was even remotely proved. It leaves you wondering, what was the real motive for this? And you know what really scares me? Could it have been a prayer meeting in a room where God spoke to these people and told them to do this? Somebody was going to say something.
Bill, I was just going to say, couldn't it be the fact that George Bush's brain was floating in alcohol for about 30 years?
I doubt it. No, I don't.
That he had hallucinated for quite a bit of time?
I really don't. I don't think so. I think what. Well, but all right. But the problem here is, here's the problem. I can't. That would be an assumption, and I can't assume that. I'm just talking about specifics that I can prove. I don't want to. I don't want to I don't want to raise an issue that I can't.
The only reason I'm bringing it up is, now I'm not saying there's anything wrong with him, but why take a guy who's been far out of whack?
Yeah.
Why not take a normal person?
I know, but that's...
Take your Ralph Nader. Take somebody who has a brain in his head.
But that's politics. That's politics. That's the kind of stuff you do in camp. I'm not talking about that, though. I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about God, and I'm talking about religion, and I'm talking about the people who founded this country and who said that you must keep church and state separate. That's what I'm talking. I'm not, all the stuff about him or Clinton or presidents or Nader, that's all politics stuff, and you have every right. But in this particular case in which I'm talking, I'm trying simply to show that there is a situation where we have in the government a fundamentalist Christian base, which is frightening, and we have one in the Middle East, and then we have one in Israel. Now, when I was here the last time, General Boykin stated that God had showed him demonic activity in places that were at odds with us. And this same man that said he has been shown demonic activity by God. Now, this is our Undersecretary of Defense. He also said that God selected President Bush because of this time. Now, the problem with all of this, in my heart, is this is it. It reflects the beliefs of Christian fundamentalists. I went through Christian fundamentalism. I don't know how many of you have ever been involved in it. But the very premise, the very basis upon which it exists, is to do whatever is possible to hasten the second coming of Jesus Christ. That's what Christian fundamentalists live for. The Lord is coming soon, Jesus is coming soon, and we've got to do whatever we can to hasten his return. Oh, Jesus come. But also these very same people are very in tune with reading the Bible. And they are aware of the fact that according to the Bible, Jesus cannot come to the earth until there is a war called Armageddon. So, if I am a fundamentalist and I control the military and I believe that God wants me to do this because it's going to get Jesus back here, that's some scary news for the rest of you guys hanging around trying to think about going to work. Because something really big and nasty could happen. And it becomes scary because the fact is that the Bible and the book of Revelation states there must be a war called Armageddon, which kills 1/3 of all life on earth. Then Jesus comes. See? So, I mean, if I am a fundamentalist and I want to get Jesus back here, I know that I have to be prepared to launch some heavy-duty stuff. I mean, there's going to be a war. There has to be. That's the belief. And we have people that are on this earth who preach the Bible. They preach Jesus. And now we see on the screen that they are in a position to incite a war. A war that they believe will hasten the return of Jesus Christ. I mean, there's no room because if you're a fundamentalist, you have to believe the Bible. And there's no room around this because the Bible says Jesus doesn't come back until this war of Armageddon. When I was speaking a couple weeks ago, John Burke came into the room. John was the host for the American Movie Classics, and he came in and visited us from New York. And he told me later, when he came into the room, he heard me mention the word Armageddon. And he said, this is going to be a good one. So it would seem logical to me, since we have a president and some military people here, and there are leaders and military people over there who are on a course of a collision because of religion, it would seem logical that it would be a good time to look at Armageddon, the apocalypse. And of course the book of Revelation, because, there's really scary stuff. And if we have dedicated fundamentalists running the government and running the military, and that's the book they're using to act out what they believe, then I, for one, would say head for Ontario, quick. Well, what is the book of Revelation? What does it mean? What does the book of Revelation mean, and what is it? In the world of Christianity, the goal of the book of Revelation is the second coming of Jesus Christ on a white horse. Let me show you on this next overhead, and you'll see an ancient or an old drawing of it. And that basically is what it is. This is Jesus coming back on the white horse. All right? Now, this is the problem. Most people in Christian circles that you talk to believe this literally, that Jesus will come back on a white horse. All right? A horse! Running over the clouds. They believe it with all their heart. There's a famous thing that a lot of Christian fundamentalists said, God said it, I believe it, and that settles it. See? And so this is Jesus on the white horse. Now here's the thing that you have to be understanding of. This book from which it comes, the book of Revelation, is Greek mythology. It is written in Greek. It is thousands of years old. It is Greek mythology. It doesn't say anything about Jesus on the white horse, but it says somebody's on the white horse. The white horse in Greek mythology is Pegasus. So anybody riding a white horse across the sky would have to be riding on what? Pegasus. The interesting thing is, in Greek mythology, the guy who rode the white horse was Zeus. He used to throw lightning bolts. Okay? And the other interesting, if you were calling out to him, trying to get his attention, what would you say? Hey, Zeus! Which is Jesus. No, not really. Pegasus is the white horse, okay? Let me show you the difference. Our leaders who take the Bible literally are waiting and trying to make this happen. Pegasus is a white horse, as you can see. His father, Poseidon, is the sea god. Okay? So Pegasus then is a white seahorse. All right? That's what it is. It's a white seahorse. Now, when Pegasus, without a rider, flew over Hippocrene, which is a mountain in mythological Greece, he kicked the fountain, and it sprung, and he became sacred to the Muses and the goddess of the mountain, and they were the god. That was the goddess of memory. So Pegasus became sacred to the goddess of memory. So we have a white horse, a white seahorse that's connected to memory. All right? Now, in your head, most of you have one. If you feel around here on the top of your shoulder, there's a head. Inside of that head is something called hippocampus. All right? The word hippocampus means seahorse. If you look up hippocampus in Stedman's Medical Dictionary, you'll see that that little piece in your brain is white. It's a white seahorse. And if you look up hippocampus, you'll find out that its purpose in your head is to control memory. Okay? So who is coming back, and what is the white horse? It's a restoration of memory inside of us to take us back to our origins. That's what this is about. It has nothing whatsoever to do with somebody coming in a horse across the clouds. And once you begin to understand mythology, Greek mythology, you can begin to understand the book of Revelation, and you then take all of that stuff about killing and bombing and all of that stuff and throw it away, because it's talking about Armageddon, which goes on in here, inside of the mind. The forces on one side, the forces on the other side, and the big battle that rages inside of us. See? And so here then we have something beautiful that we can prove, as opposed to something completely nonsensical that the fundamentalists feel is what's going to happen. And it wouldn't be so bad, and everybody's entitled to believe whatever they want. I mean, I'm not here saying, hey, you're not going to believe my way, it's ridiculous. But what I'm saying here is when this type of belief then escalates into a portent for violence of such tremendous proportion, it's scary. And that is the problem we face. The world, Christians, they're waiting for Armageddon. And every time you hear about it, you think this is it, this is Armageddon. It's the same thing when you have an earthquake. Did you hear? We had a lot of earthquakes. You know, these people don't know. Do you know there's an earthquake somewhere about every 3 seconds? You have to have earthquakes or the earth would be dead. The earth moves just like you do. There's nothing wrong with an earthquake. The problem is when you happen to live on top of it. But the earthquake itself has to be. Nothing wrong with that. It's a natural, normal thing to have earthquakes. You can go on the internet, or you can go into bookstores, and you'll find thousands upon thousands of books about the book of Revelation. Everyone has an idea what it means. And they have a right. Everybody has a right. They can write a book. They can get on TV. There's nothing wrong with that. Jack Van Impe and his wife Rex Sullivan, they're on every week talking about what's going to happen with Revelation. And they make a buck. There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody's forcing anybody to listen to it. It's got as much right. There's a book called The Late Great Planet Earth. I don't know if you've ever heard about it. It was written by a guy named Hal Lindsey. It's made millions of dollars. This is The Late Great Planet Earth. It was Hal Lindsey's book. Look at here, it's on fire. You know? I mean, hey, you know, this could be. This could be. But Hal Lindsey made a lot of money on the book, and you know, more power to him. But here's the basis of the problem with these books. The basis of the problem is that they all look at the book of Revelation as it applies to the time that they live in. You see? I can make that book of Revelation say anything. If you lived 100 years ago, we can find stuff in it that you can say, must mean that. See? And so what we have is we have people who gather up all these books. Oh, look what's going to happen. Oh, all these things are going to happen. Because the people writing the books are basing everything to try to equate the symbols with what's going on in their particular lifetime. 666. Everybody knows about 666. There's only one person, and when this was written, that fits that as far as the numerical value of the name. 666. Back in those days, it meant Nero. Nero fiddled while Rome burned. 666. Now, as we got out of Nero's time, 666 became Napoleon. Then it became Hitler. 666. It means all things to all people, depending who's the local weird, nasty person that's going to be 666. I'm sure there are people who are sitting there and say 666 is Saddam or Osama, whatever you want them to be, 666. But at one time it was Nero. There's a part in the book of Revelation that talks about the great city burning and all the merchants of the earth looking at this great city going up in smoke. In an hour, it just all came to rubble. You could look at that now and say, it must be talking about 9/11. Because that's what happened. The whole place came down in an hour. But you know what? It could also be a portrait of Berlin, Germany during the Second World War. It could also be a portrait of Tokyo. And then if you want to go back, it could be Rome. Could be any of these places. Yet every author of the book of Revelation has done the same thing. Namely, they considered the symbolic events as applying to their particular time. In so doing, they've totally eliminated any scientific documentation or proof of their conclusions other than their own religious training, their own background. I mean, you never see a Christian writer writing about Armageddon and thinking that it's a good thing for the Muslims. Or it's always a good thing for their group. It's easy to take a book like that and interpret the symbols and say, look, this is good for us. Say. But when you pick up a Bible and you look at the book of Revelation, the very first thing you have to ask yourself is, what kind of a book do I have in my hand? Okay? If you pick up a Harry Potter book, you realize that you can't take it literally. It's a mystical type of adventure book. It's based on a mystical adventure. Donald Duck. Donald Duck is not a true character. But even though there are ducks that are real, I saw some. Did you ever? They're real ducks. Quack, quack. But Donald is not. But a duck that is real is used in that particular story. You pick up a book about John Kennedy or Abraham Lincoln or Marilyn Monroe, and you know that these books are based on fact, or at least based on real people who did exist. So the book itself has to tell you how it should be approached. Yeah? And here's the problem with it. You can't pick up a book like Harry Potter or Donald Duck and say, well, I know this isn't true, but this here part sounds true. This sounds true to me. I think this happened over at Ethel's house.
Yeah, right.
It could have been. And this is what they do with the book of Revelation. You take the most outlandish, bizarre stuff, and you take what you want in order to make your point and say, this is true. Armageddon is true. The lady with the stars in her head, well, that's not true. And some of the other wild stuff, well, angels are up there throwing things on the earth. Doesn't sound true, but that Armageddon, that's definitely true. How about the four horsemen of the apocalypse? Let me show you. How about the four horsemen of the apocalypse? There they are. Is it true? This guy, if you can see this guy, he hasn't even got any skin on. This guy's a skeleton. Skeletons don't ride horses. Well, this guy does, yeah. I mean, this is a bad, rough crowd. But this is the point that I'm trying to make very seriously. If you take something like this and you see it in the book, it should tell you not to take that book literally. It should tell you that that entire book is a symbol of something else. Okay. If you take up a book and it says death is riding one of the horses, are you going to take that literally? Of course not. Well, then how can you take Armageddon literally? You know what this seems to be? Something that came from deep inside somebody's whacked out mind. That sounds really weird, doesn't it? This is something like when you sniff stuff, you see stuff like this. You know what I mean? Like something that maybe when you go to bed at night and you leave your body in the garage and you go out, you know, at nighttime, and you're roaming around in that world, you see stuff like this sometimes. In other words, this will tell you about this book in no uncertain terms that you have something written here that is of another existence, not pertaining to the physical activities of the earth, because skeletons can't ride horses. Okay. Now, in Revelation 12:1, the book of Revelation says this. You can take that out. A great sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. That doesn't sound literal to me. She's clothed with the sun and sitting on the moon. And she's got 12 stars on her head. Look at it. Overhead, look. There she is. Sun is clothing her and the stars are on her head. And doesn't it make you think this might be a strange tale that's way, way out somewhere in space? And yet people have been scared out of their pants by fundamentalists who wrote books and by people now who are waiting for them to unleash this Armageddon, because then they will turn their sights upward and look for Jesus coming back on the horse. See? The point that I'm trying to make here is that if you cannot take the four horses, or if you cannot take this woman literally, then this is not a literal book, and you cannot take Armageddon literally. See? I mean, it's a symbol of something else. See, the reason that they take Armageddon literally is because there is a plain, like a field in Israel called Megiddo. Megiddo. And Megiddo is the place where they used to come out and battle one another. Right? So it all becomes part of the myth. This is part of the myth. This is part of the mythology. Okay? And the mythology of this is the Greek way of talking about things that are like this. Pegasus, a white horse. No white horse in the sky. It's inside of you. It's something inside of you. That's what all of this is about. And if Pegasus is inside of you, so is she inside of you. And so are the four horses inside of you. When you're looking pretty good, things physically are going okay, pretty intelligent, your brain's ticking away, the black horse is riding good. When you're throwing a temper tantrum, and you're really ticked off, the red horse is rounding the bend. When you don't feel quite up to snuff, but not too bad, the pale horse, your physical, is out front. And of course, when you go into meditation and you lift yourself, then you're on the white horse, which is the spirit. That's what we're talking about. No horses. Okay? They're talking about the fourfold nature of you: spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional. That's what it's about. But have you ever heard anybody tell you that? They never tell you that. They're waiting for these guys to come back. In the book of Revelation, there are thrones, and there are lightnings, and there are thunders, and there are voices, and there are 24 elders baked in a pie. Not really. But there are 24 elders. And there are 7 seals, and there's a star called wormwood. What are you going to read this literally? And there's an angel, Albert and Joan, flying out across heaven saying, "Whoa! Whoa!" Well, he could, maybe the horse is going too fast, but he said W-O-E, whoa, whoa. Let me show you overhead 12. Yeah, there he is. And these are drawings, this is artwork. It's mythology. It's like Disneyland. But it, means something much more serious than Disneyland. And this is the good one. You can take it. And this is what happened. This is what they've done. You take 666, which at one time meant Nero and then Hitler and Napoleon and all these people. 666 is the mark of the beast. But that wouldn't do for us. Okay? So it couldn't be Nero. We didn't want it to be Napoleon or... So we have to have the sign of the beast because it says it's on your forehead and you couldn't buy or sell without the sign. So the mark of the beast has become the UPC code on our merchandise. You know, when you go to the store and you put the thing under there? $1.67, Walmart. And why did they make it that? Because it seems to go together with needing the mark and buying. So let me show you. The picture's a little out of focus, but because it was small. Let me show you. This is it. Do you see this kid? Excuse me. This comes from a Christian internet site. Do you see this kid? You could take his head and put it under the thing and see how much it costs. I'm telling you this. This is the mark of the beast now. This is where we've got. You see, what I'm saying is they have got to, in some way, justify this because they are reading mythology literally. They're reading it literally. I'm going to take that one down. So in other words, depending on the time you are living, the book of Revelation can mean all things to all people. It'll mean something different 100 years ago. It'll mean something different 100 years from now. But when you go through a book of symbols that you know cannot be taken literally, and then you turn around and teach people that the gathering of armies in the war of Armageddon is a literal battle between us and the Muslims or whatever, you have violated then the very premise of common sense, which says that if a book is symbols, it is all symbols, and none of it can be taken literally. But you've done it intentionally. And the reason you've done it intentionally is so that you control people, you frighten people into coming to get you to save them, and they bring their money. Give you an idea. I'll give you another idea how this stuff is used in contemporary society. There is a statement in Revelation about the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay? Let me show you. I don't know if you can see this too good because I had to blow it up. And it's really, but this is an absolute, nightmare. Here's some kind of animal. He's got all kinds of heads. But here is the beast with 7 heads. Now, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can you see him? I mean, it's kind of messy, but you can see it. I just couldn't get any clearer than that. But this is this apocalyptic nightmare that this character was having when he, wrote this. Symbolism, whatever you want to call it, that people are taking. Somehow, in this age, that beast with 10 horns has become the 10-nation European Federation. Uh-huh. Can you imagine this? This must mean, why? Oh, we heard that there are 10 nations that are going to join the European Federation. It must be that. That must be the beast. What have they done? They have taken something totally out of whack and made it to be connected with something in our time. In other words, if you look long enough at a strange, screwy picture like this, and then look around, you'll find something you can connect it to. It must mean this. To someone who lived earlier, it would mean 7, 10, or something else. But take a look at that picture. And I know it's hard. You get a pretty good idea of where you have to go if you want to explore the real world of Revelation, Armageddon, and Apocalypse. You have to go into that part of the mind that is beyond the sane. I'm not talking about sane as we know sane. Some people say, And you're insane. That's where you have to go. You have to go to that place where things are not like they are here. I'm not saying that you'll find a dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns. This is all metaphysical. This is all in impulses. This is all in electronics. This is in this place of space that controls the planets and the stars and all of these things and finds its way down deep into the right hemisphere. You have to go over there and begin to understand, because it talks about the 7s and the 10s, and it talks about the beast, and it's all talking about energies inside of you. So you have to go where the insane dwells. There's people that have gone there. I remember the story of Carl Jung. Carl Jung was one of the most sophisticated, what was he, a psychoanalyst in the world. And he had to take funny stuff. And he went nuts. Not really, but I mean, during the periods of time when he was freaking out. And they said, Carl, what in the heck are you doing? He's saying, how am I going to understand what they're seeing unless I see it? Was the guy, remember we talked about in the Amazon with the DNA coming and the plants talking to them? And the people in the Amazon could take a plant from this tree, and then they could take a plant from a tree 20 miles away, and they could combine it, and it'd heal people. And everybody would say, how the heck did you know that that leaf and that leaf from 20 miles away, and you put them two together, and it would heal? But how did you know that? And they said, the plants told us. What? Oh, the plants tell. How do you get the plants to tell you? Ayusuka. You take this stuff. And so, I forget the guy's name that wrote the book. He took it. And he said he saw the same things. And he saw serpents. And he saw dragons. And he saw spirally things. And he realized what they were encountering was DNA. But you can't tell people. You can't tell that guy in his military uniform preaching. You can't tell him about this stuff. Because they don't understand. They don't understand. If you take your head, you've got your skull's probably, whatever, a 1/4 inch thick. Right outside of there, everything is. Huh. If I had my cell phone here, you could open your cell phone and you could hear people talking to you. Where are their voices? Where are their voices coming from? If I had a television set with rabbit ears, I could stick the rabbit ears on, turn it on, you'd see elephants and people playing football. Right in this room on top of where you're sitting, people are tackling one another and shooting one another. You don't know for cockta what's going on already. You're sitting here, you think, oh, all it's here is me. Oh, no. The room was filled with stuff. People, things. And that's where you got to go. To understand that. Yeah. And I go there. Things of the mind that are removed from the human mind. You cannot take those things and interpret them on the physical realm. Anybody has the right to interpret the book of Revelation. There's nothing wrong with that. I do it. But the strange things that it contains are terribly dangerous for people who believe in them literally and have bombs. Do you realize that could be the button that launches nuclear button? And God told me, don't be afraid. Jesus wants you to press it. Jesus is coming back. And I press. And if you want to open this door of this insane place, I'll be glad to accompany you. It's amazing. So the Revelation, the Apocalypse, Armageddon, and God, I'm thinking I got a couple of people here for the first time. But all of these Armageddon things take place in the invisible realm of the mind. They are of unimaginable origin. They are totally beyond the physical. They have nothing to do with wars on the planet Earth. They have to do with wars that take place in your mind. And you know yourself that many of the battles you've had to fight alone in your mind. And it says in the book of Revelation that you go to the Isle of Patmos. What is that? 5 minutes? Okay. I thought he wanted to go. I used to be in a born-again place. They'd say, I'd see that hand, brother. You're saved. Bow your head and bring me some money. But you go to the Isle of Patmos. In other words, you've got to go into the water. And you've got to separate from the land where your physical life is led. Patmos is a small volcanic island in the Aegean Sea, off of Turkey's west coast. Now, why would it be necessary to go to a place out in the water where there is volcanic activity, where all of this stuff then would come? Well, the five phases of the human mind in Greek are earth, water, air, fire, and the new mind. So you take that, which is you. You go into the water, which is the Aegean Sea, but you don't have to go into the Aegean Sea. You go to the second level of the mind. You rise inside of yourself to the second level of the mind. And there you come up into the air and are touched in the fourth stage by the fire, which is the volcano erupting inside of you, the pineal gland. So all this stuff goes on, all metaphysical, mystical stuff inside of you. And it is there where this revelation comes. And it is there where you start to understand about the seven-headed dragons and the lady with the stars and 666 and all of this crazy stuff. Okay. And it's absolutely astonishing to me that people will actually sit down and try to figure something like that out. You cannot figure that out with the left side. You can't even figure it out with the right side. It's not to be figured out. It's to be experienced. You say, I can tell you where to take it. You enter in, and there to the water, which is represented by the sea, up to the fire, which is represented by the volcano, and Patmos. What's Patmos? What's the word pat mean? I'm standing pat. I'm staying still. Be still. That's where it comes from. Pat, still. Be still. In the water. Rising up to the fire, the volcano. And you'll see the seven-headed dragon and all. Not in a wild, insane way. You'll just into this world of what all life is about. It's not anything like what we've been told. But the only ones that know this are scientists. They know, but they can't even say anything. Those scientists came out and said the things they really knew, they'd be rounded up. But they know. Quantum. Albert Einstein had to quit doing what he was doing because it got too bizarre. He said, I can't handle this anymore. Niels Bohr, who was a great quantum physicist at the time, said, Albert, don't quit now. He said, I got to. This is spooky stuff. And he quit. And it's all there if you are willing to cross that water to the other side. And so we're going to look. Because there are things and explanations. And in some cases, the explanations are, they can't make any sense to you. They wouldn't make any sense to anybody until you go into that place and you just take with you, and then you silence the left side, and that part of you, that electromagnetic field, the electro person that you are, then activates. The electro person that you are, that operates that body you're living in, knows all about this stuff. I said, well, if I know it, why can't I tell somebody? Because you're totally controlled by the left lower senses, which negates all of that. That's why you've got to shut it off. That's why the Jesus of the Bible says, take no thought. Separate from it. That's why he says, practice the single eye. Allow yourself to open to that fire. That's why he says, watch. Watch. And that's why he says all of this stuff is within you. So you've got a scary situation because you've got politicians and political leaders and military people here and over there who are looking to fulfill this fantasy they have, misrepresenting their very scriptures. And it's not only in Washington. Those characters that drove the planes into the World Trade Center were doing it so that they could wrestle with celestial virgins up in the sky.